of News On. And happy Friday to you, and welcome to News On. I'm Miranda. Thank you so much for joining us. We begin today with breaking developments on the Mueller investigation. According to a report that was literally just released overnight, there wasn't any evidence of wrongdoing by retired General Michael Flynn or any suggested Russian collusion by President Trump. Now, this report is based on the testimony that was given to the Justice Department by an FBI agent who played a lead role in that investigation. The report also states that the probe was kept open by special counsel Robert Mueller because his team had a, quote, get Trump goal. Agent William Barnett's interview with Justice Department prosecutors earlier this month claimed that both FBI superiors under former FBI Director James Comey and Mueller's team exhibited bias when it came to the pursuit of Trump. And you want to be sure and keep it right here on Real America's Voice News throughout the day for more developments on this story. Nationwide, protests just continue to grip parts of this nation since the indictment announcement in the Breonna Taylor case. Protesters and police have clashed in major cities all around the country, and recorded incidents of violence have continued to be seen over and over again. Last night in California, well, that was no different. At least one person remains hospitalized right now after being struck by a truck. It happened in Hollywood. The vehicle drove through the crowd, as you can see, knocking a protester to the ground. That's not the truck, but this happened just a few minutes later, what you're seeing. And that is a driver of a white Prius tried to drive around the protesters, as you just saw moments ago, but ended up right there getting boxed in by two vehicles. The driver was able to speed off. Wow. And for more on this and the current divide that we're seeing between the police and the people that they're sworn to protect, I'd like to welcome in Tom Whatley. He's a former detective with years of experience in law enforcement. Tom, such a pleasure to have you here live on News On.
Good to be with you again, Miranda.
So, Tom, as I mentioned, we're seeing quite the reaction from protesters who are seemingly angry with the way that the Breonna Taylor case was played out. As a former police officer, former detective, what are your thoughts on this situation? Because everywhere I go, I hear people discussing this matter.
Yeah, it's pretty much a hot topic as of late. The problem you're having is that people don't wait. And I said this with the Ferguson effect. If people would simply wait for the information to come out, because we know hands up, don't shoot was a lie. One man that lied, he told the truth under oath that he didn't do that. So, but that catapulted riots and the burning of St. Louis. Same thing here. The riots have been going on since Breonna was shot. Every loss of life is tragic. But now that the facts are out from the grand jury, we know that it was a totally different scenario than with the press. And this is the problem. And I said this earlier today, that if the press would just not fuel this, some of your media, what's happening is some of the journalists are now turning activists, and they want this because it looks good for ratings. Some of your networks are covering this 24/7, and we know it buys ad time. And that's what it's all about. Instead of actually reporting, well, the unnamed sources got to stop. They've got to stop the rhetoric. And a lot of this is on the media. And they could be the catalyst to actually put the people together if it's done right.
Well, certainly that's what we're trying to do right now. Speaking of other media networks, that's why we have you on, Tom. There was a recent Fox News poll that shows 44% of Americans are unsympathetic of the anti-police protests, which is more than 12 points higher than before. What do you think is changing these numbers?
Well, I think you're going to see a total paradigm shift where people that normally did not could care less whether the police come or go. What's happening is now they're seeing it as they're getting tired of it. They're having a hard time with this. So I think what's going to happen is that the shift is going to go. Even the moderate lefts, what fewer left out there, are saying, no, guys, you got to stop this. The police is our last front line of defense. You're not going to defund the police. You can't get rid of the departments. So you have to sit there and look at it. Okay, what is the cause and effect of it? So I think in the long run, this is really going to backfire on the anti-police people with all the rhetoric that's out there. There's much more going on in the police world. There's over 1 million police officers out there in the United States making millions of contacts a day, but it only takes one, one action by a police officer, whether good or bad, to set off, the masses, and that should not be happening.
Tom Watley, we're running out of time. Always a pleasure to have you. Thank you so much for joining us here on News On. We'll continue to follow those developments. Hopefully we can have you back here on the program under better circumstances. Good to see you. Have a great weekend, my friend.
Anytime. You too.
Unfortunately, violence also erupting overseas. 2 people are recovering now after a stabbing attack today near the old headquarters of the Charlie Hebdo newspaper in Paris. Officers were able to arrest the suspect today. The 2 victims work at a documentary film company, some of whose employees witnessed that 2015 terror attack. 12 people died when terrorists attacked the satirical newspaper's office after it published cartoons of the Prophet Muhammad. Charlie Hebdo recently republished those cartoons that led to the violence of that 2015 attack. The victims' injuries today are said to be non-life-threatening, and the investigation, meanwhile, continues as to what prompted this attack. A model used to forecast the number of future COVID-19 deaths now predicts fewer people will die from the virus. The model is from the Institute of Health Metrics and Evaluation at the University of Washington School of Medicine. This week, it predicted that more than 371,000 people will die from the coronavirus by January 1st. Keep it right here on News On. Still to come, we're going to remember the late Justice Ginsburg as she becomes the first woman to lie in state. We're going to be talking to Dr. Wendy Patrick about the historical significance of that, and also who the president is eyeballing to become his nominee. Again, he's expected to make that announcement tomorrow at 5 o'clock Eastern. We'll be right back. Welcome back to News On. Supreme Court Justice Ruth Bader Ginsburg continues to make history even in passing. Ginsburg, who passed away last Friday due to complications of pancreatic cancer, is now the first woman to lie in state in the U.S. Capitol. She's also the first Jewish person to be given that honor. Ginsburg joins now the likes of Rosa Parks, John Lewis, and Abraham Lincoln as those who were laid in state or laid in honor at the Capitol. And the president and the first lady paid their respects to the late Ginsburg yesterday, while his rival, Vice President Joe Biden, and his wife, Dr. Jill Biden, made their visits today. The president said he would wait until tomorrow at 5 o'clock Eastern time to announce his nominee out of respect for the late Justice Ginsburg. For more on this, I'd like to welcome in Dr. Wendy Patrick. She's a legal and political analyst, and it's always good to have you here on this program. Now, you're going to become a regular. You didn't even know it.
It's okay. I love joining you.
So, yes. So, my mom was a U.S. history and world history teacher, and you know that I love the law, but I love seeing history in the making, and that's part of the reason why I became a journalist, and that's what we're seeing today. But for people who don't quite grasp it, we're talking again, this is the first woman to lie in state. What does that mean? I mean, what is the historical significance of today, not just for Ginsburg's family, but for Americans throughout the country, and for you personally, as someone who has prosecuted over 100 cases and is in the legal profession?
Well, that's right. You know, one of the great things about Justice Ginsburg, and I always describe it as her ability to disagree without being disagreeable. That's why she was bold and beloved. But it's also one of the reasons why she may have been petite in stature, but powerful in status. She was able to author dissents that were before her time. In other words, they became some of the points she made majority opinions down the road. And she always had that uncanny knack of knowing exactly how to present her case in a fashion that was gracious, not grandstanding. And this is what we're seeing in the way she's being honored after her death, is we remember her as somebody that actually made such an impact on history in her very sort of soft-spoken way, in which she was both reserved but a rock star who ironically loved opera. But as you mentioned, Miranda, she's making history because she is the first woman to lie in state. Some of the other, Rosa Parks, for example, she lied in honor as a citizen. Very different.
Right,
we're just
very different.
38 individuals in total, which, by the way, including Ruth Bader Ginsburg, which include 12 presidents. So this is an enormous honor that is fitting for a justice that is so beloved and was such a trailblazer.
Yeah, can you explain, though, what it means? Because a lot of people don't really know the difference. What does it mean to lie in state?
When you lie in state, you actually have an honor where you're in the state capitol, and there's no written rules regarding who gets to lie in state. It's determined by the current House and the current Senate. And so in this case, Speaker Pelosi and others really pushed for this because, like the rest of us, whether or not we share Justice Ginsburg ideology, or whether we share her political beliefs, or even her religion, or whatever it may be, we respect who she was and what she wanted to do to change the world, to make it a better place. And as a woman in the law, as you point out, for more years than I'm going to admit, lest your viewers do the math, let's just say it's been many years that I have greatly admired her as a woman, as a person, both personally and professionally. So what I'm seeing now this week is that I was not alone. This, in fact, is the majority sentiment. Whether or not you agreed with her rulings, you agree with the way she lived her life. And that's what we're seeing now. And that's even more pronounced in the fact that she's been chosen among that elite group to actually lie in state at the Capitol.
Yes. Truly an honor. I'm just in awe over it. And I think there are a lot of women that say that I wouldn't be in the position where I am now if it wasn't for her. That she definitely set the stage for that. So, go ahead. Go ahead. You can respond to that.
Well, one thing I don't think I shared with you is that I was actually sworn into the United States Supreme Court Bar Association in front of her and her colleagues back in the day. And then after that, had the pleasure of having her speak at so many events that groups that I belonged to put on. She always said yes, whether it was receiving an award or giving a speech or a meet and greet. She was always available and accessible. And that doesn't describe everybody that sits on the Supreme Court, but it sure described her. And we're seeing a little bit more of that legacy today as people come forward and share that that was their experience too. Everybody seemed to know her.
Yeah, you were holding out on me there. You didn't share that with me. I'm glad you did, though.
We hadn't discussed it.
I'm glad you did. Yeah, it's kind of interesting because one of her most significant early cases was the United States versus Virginia. And the reason I kind of, piqued my interest is that the president is headed to Virginia today where he's going to be holding a rally. So kind of interesting that she's lying in state today and that's where the president is headed. But speaking of the president, as I mentioned, he went with the First Lady yesterday to pay his respects. And he said he was going to wait until tomorrow out of respect for fans, family, friends, everyone to honor her. There's going to be a private ceremony again at Arlington, but that's going to be taking place later. But he's supposed to make his announcement 5 o'clock Eastern time tomorrow. We're all on pins and needles waiting to hear who he's going to announce. But most people are thinking it's going to be Judge Barrett. What do you think? Your thoughts?
I would tend to agree because it would be pretty out of character for him to go out on a limb and nominate somebody that hasn't already been vetted, particularly given the short time frame that he's working with. So Judge Barrett, she is both conservative and confirmable. And that's important because he has to nominate somebody that can at least get through the Senate without losing any more Republican senators. It looks like they have the numbers now. It looks like they have the math. But he wouldn't want to risk it by nominating a no-name or somebody that's lesser known or somebody that hadn't recently been vetted and confirmed for the position in which she now holds, which Judge Barrett obviously was. That's where we get this famous exchange between she and the senator about, well, your Catholic faith speaks loudly within you. You remember that statement by Senator Feinstein? She was able to then describe how she wouldn't allow her personal beliefs to color the way she viewed precedent, i.e. Roe versus Wade. So she's a little safer of a choice than some of the people that he could nominate. So I think it's going to be her. I will be very surprised if it's not, but I'm sure if it's not, you and I will be talking about that as well.
That's right, because I'm going to have you back on the program Monday. Want to ask you, though, you said confirmable. Obviously, Democrats are trying to do, and we've seen this from both parties. So just in fairness, doing whatever they can to stop this from happening until after the election. But it looks like the Senate is going to be able to push through no matter what tactic they try. What are your thoughts?
Well, they will be able to push it through if it's a confirmable candidate. And I share your sentiment there because it is true. We don't want to have senators making comments like, we're going to have a confirmation by November when they don't even know who the candidate is. That's not what their role is. But I know some of them have been making statements like that, probably wishing they could phrase it a little better. And you're right, if the Democrats were in power, they'd be doing the same thing. But all that is just another reason that the president has to nominate somebody that is not too far right. He has to choose somebody that's not only closer to the center, but has already expressed her desire and her commitment to following settled law. Those are the magic words here, because too many Democrats are afraid that a radical appointment might totally shift the balance of the court to overturn some of the things that they care deeply about, that the Democrats care deeply about. Somebody that is bound to follow settled law, regardless of her personal religious beliefs, will do exactly that. Remember, Justice Ginsburg was Jewish, and she did not let that color her opinions. Judge Barrett is Catholic and has vowed not to let that color her opinions either.
Yes, but we've nominated and confirmed judges, and they've still surprised us since then. But we'll have to see what happens. The president's going to make his decision, make that announcement, 5 o'clock Eastern tomorrow, and we'll have Dr. Patrick Wendy joining us on Monday to discuss that announcement. We'll see. I know we're thinking it's going to be Judge Barrett, but we'll see. The president is known for his surprises. Thanks so much for joining us. Have a great weekend, Dr. Patrick. Good to have you.
You too, Miranda. Thank you.
Still ahead, are you one of millions of Americans who suffer from pre-existing conditions? If so, the president's latest healthcare announcements are more important than ever before. We're going to break it all down, what the president had to say during his campaign stop in North Carolina and how that could impact you and your family. That's coming up right after the break. We'll be right back. I'm Miranda. Since the beginning of his campaign way back in 2015, President Trump has promised Americans a better health care system than the one he was put in place by the Obama administration. And yesterday, he attempted to deliver on that promise, announcing health care reforms that he believes will save the average American time and money. For more on this, we'd like to welcome in Just the News Washington, D.C. correspondent Sophie Mann. Sophie, can you give our viewers just kind of an overall overview, if you will, what the president proposed during this health care initiative that he made in North Carolina yesterday?
Absolutely. So the president's new healthcare initiative focuses on three main tenets of the American healthcare system, which is to say they're focused on better care, more choice, and lower costs for the American people. The executive orders that President Trump signed yesterday primarily focus on protecting Americans with pre-existing conditions from losing their health coverage if some part or entire parts of the Affordable Care Act are deemed unconstitutional by high courts, in addition to protecting Americans from what they call surprise billing from hospitals and from insurance companies.
So switching gears here, if we can, a little bit, because we're going to continue to monitor that story, if you will. It's Friday. Switching gears, though. You've been covering a story that involves the president's tax returns. This has been a hot button issue, has been going on now, what seems like for several months. Tell us more.
Yes, so as you said, this has been going on for years now. We know that the president has long declined to share his private tax reforms with the public, a decision that has met some backlash over the years. In July, the Supreme Court said that the president's position as president alone will not protect him from needing to share his tax returns if that is his attorney's argument, but sent it back to a lower court in Manhattan, which today the appeals court in New York will hear another argument from the president's attorneys, effectively arguing that the subpoena from the Manhattan DA was issued in bad faith. And they don't feel that he should need to share his tax returns, and it will continue to be a fight for the foreseeable future, though perhaps not one that the Supreme Court will take up again until after the November election.
Sophie Mann with Just the News, thank you so much for joining us. Pleasure to have you as always. Have a great weekend.
Thank you. You too.
And speaking of the president's announcement in North Carolina, it's important to remember that the Tar Heel state is one of the key battleground states that the president hopes to win in November. So for more on that and to see how each candidate is faring in that state, I'd like to welcome in to the studio Glenn Downs. He is a former congressional chief of staff and a veteran of more than 30 years in the world of politics and government. Glenn, good to see you again. It's been a while.
Thank you so much for having me. Great to be here.
So the president is on his way to Virginia. He's expected to have a rally, but Politico had an interesting report saying that part of the strategy of him actually going there is to kind of win over some of those voters in rural parts of North Carolina. Is that, in your opinion, part of his strategy?
It probably does make sense. North Carolina is a very big state, geographically a big, long state, and it's got a lot of different media markets. And unlike a place like, say, Ohio, where you could go in and hit Cleveland, hit Cincinnati, you've got Ohio covered. North Carolina is not that way, and there's a big pocket.
Because you grew up there, too.
Oh, absolutely, yeah.
So you know this well.
There's a big pocket of voters up there who get their news from the Norfolk, Virginia media market. Southeastern Virginia actually is what the people in northeastern North Carolina watch on TV. They get their
Interesting.
Yeah, so that's probably part of what he's trying to do there.
Kind of like the complexity of when it comes to like Florida as well.
Right, it's a very big, diverse, big state, and people on one end of the state, up in the Panhandle, for example, don't know or don't care frequently about some of the same issues that are happening down in South Florida.
Right, and demographics totally different. I mean,
right.
Florida is known like the further north you go, the further south you're going.
Right.
Which is where you reside right now, which is where we are right now. Speaking of that, there have been a lot of developments when it comes to Florida. How important, because we heard recently the president's campaign saying that it expects to win Florida, but it doesn't necessarily need Florida. That's the first time I've heard that. Granted, you've been in politics a lot longer than me, but I've always heard that there hasn't been a president that has become president since probably the 1990s without winning Florida. Am I wrong here?
No, I think you're probably right. I mean,
okay.
I'm sure somebody in the president's campaign would like to say that and like to assert that, so that because that would be a state that's going to come in early in the night. The results, at least the reported results, will come in very early, and if it doesn't look good in Florida, then people would start throwing in the towel as you move further west,
right.
Obviously. So you want to say that, but when you start doing the math of the Electoral College, it's very difficult or almost impossible to come up with a scenario that doesn't include winning Florida.
Right. So let's talk about these key battleground states. We mentioned North Carolina, where you grew up, Florida, where you reside now. Obviously, you think Florida is pretty key and central there, but if you're looking at all these different states, Wisconsin, Ohio, which ones do you think are going to be the most challenging for President Trump, and which ones do you think he's more likely to win?
Well, that's a really
It's been tricky. I mean, even going back to like 2016, I mean, he barely won some of these places by like a percentage point or two. And, we look at the polls, whether you believe them or not, it shows a pretty tight race between these two.
Right. Well, we're unlike, say, Florida or North Carolina, which I think North Carolina is a must-win state for the president as well. Just to get.
Why do you think that?
Well, just to get to the electoral
I mean, I know it's
map.
critical, but why?
Well, because it's a big state. It's one of the top 10 largest states. With 15 electoral votes, and if he were to lose, say, in North Carolina in those 15 electoral votes, then he'd have to then go on and run the table in some of the states that you were just referencing, like Pennsylvania and Wisconsin and Michigan, where currently, if you sort of use most of the conventional math that people use to analyze the electoral college situation, the president needs to win one or two of those several states. But if he were to lose, say, in North Carolina, he would have to then almost run the table in some of these states. So which is difficult to see. Although I know some of his supporters think that in the end of the day, this is not going to be all that close in their minds. But most conventional thinkers think it's going to be a close race.
What do you think?
I'm in the close category.
Why do you think it's going to be so close?
Well,
because I hear a lot of people say the same thing as you.
Well, it's because obviously in some states they're not even trying to win, like New York or whatever. So in terms of the popular vote, they could Joe Biden, for example, could have a really big victory in New York,
right.
But you're still only going to get a set number of electoral votes. Same thing with a place like California. But for doing the electoral, all the polling, and you have to question the efficacy of a lot of polling. But
which I do. I'm sorry. If you're a pollster watching, I do. But I remember 2016, I did only 2 polls. Out of how many that actually got it right?
Well, that's right. Well, first of all, they're a very difficult time.
Right.
You set up a sample, obviously, but then you're actually the way they get in touch with people, technology has changed so much, and people have not, they used to pick up the phone and call people's landlines, and the landlines are gone, except for
landlines. What are that?
What is
that? I'm just kidding.
And then getting through to people and then then doing accurate samples in terms of who's going to actually turn out and vote. So if you underestimate the enthusiasm, say, of the Trump supporters, which they did, they had that's
silent.
Well, right.
That silent vote. I still see a lot of people that support.
Well, and then also I think you can make a legitimate argument that would indicate that it's because it's politically incorrect in many circles to say that you're a supporter of President Trump.
Right.
You're probably going to get some percentage, that's statistically significant.
I see it all the time when we run Your Voice segment, which we're going to have coming up, but I see it all the time with people who are in support of this president, who decline to voice their opinion because they don't want to be beat up, or they're fearful of losing their job, or people hiring them because of their political views.
Right.
That's how divisive we are. We've run out of time, Glenn Downs, but thank you so much. Hope to have you back on.
It's great to be here. Thank you so much.
Yeah, it's been definitely going to be an exciting election year, so you'll have to come back. Still to come here on this edition of News On. Speaking of your voice, we're going to share it. It's our favorite thing to do during the show, and that is to let you speak your mind, because after all, that is what we do. We work for you. You're watching News On. We'll be right back. Welcome back to News On. Here on this program, we like to highlight your voice. In fact, it's something we do every day on the Your Voice segment, and there's no better showcase of America's voice, real America's voice, than what you'll find at the president's campaign rallies. We are proud now to bring you wall-to-wall coverage of each and every one of his campaign rallies, as much as we possibly can, with our very own Dr. Gina Loudon, who recaps how you felt at the rally that happened last night in Jacksonville, Florida. Take a look.
Seems like I always think that this rally was the most enthusiastic one I've ever been to, but this rally seems to be the most enthusiastic one I've ever been to. Certainly for a hangar rally, the numbers around 2 o'clock were into the 5,000 to 6,000. I don't know how many people were here, but it was a crowd, and they were super excited. I also had the chance to ask many of the attendees 2 questions. Number one, why are you here standing in the hot sun on a Florida day to see this president? And their answers were varied but interesting. And also, how do they plan to vote? Not whom do they plan to vote for, but how do they plan to vote? Because, of course, the mail-in ballots are a big issue during this election. But some people might prefer to vote in person. I had a chance to ask rally goers that question. Watch.
Well, the biggest thing for me is I've been a supporter of Donald Trump for a long time, and it's close enough to home, and I get to be around people that are like-minded, so it's a great event for me. You know, it's funny you asked that. I've received 3 mail-in ballots, and I didn't request any. I'm going in person to vote.
Just to show my support for Donald Trump and America. This is my 8th rally, actually.
Oh.
Yeah.
Wow.
So I'm here to support Donald Trump and show America that we're here and we're behind him. I'll vote in person.
All right. You know, that's the only answer I've had today. So
I want to make sure my vote's counted, and that's the American way. We go and we show up at the polls.
I believe that Trump is the man of the hour. I believe that he is the one. He made some promises. He's kept those promises, and I believe there's more and better things to come. It's like I had to be here. I know he won't know me or see me in the crowd, but it's kind of like, you know, that parent's there for you up in heaven. He knows I'm here. Oh, absolutely. I've been voting ever since I was old enough, and I quickly realized I was a Republican, and I value what they have to say as far as their platform. I will be voting in person, and I am so proud when I walk out of there. I still have the last voter sticker from the last vote. I do it always in person.
So this will be my 2nd Trump rally. I got to go the first time he was in Jacksonville, and he is by far one of my favorite presidents, and I just hate Biden, and I don't want him in office. Unless there's a return policy on the voting, which wouldn't work out, I will definitely be voting in person because I don't believe in voting by mail. If you can go to Target, you can vote in person.
Just to be able to see our president in his time and just to support a man that loves America first.
I agree. This is kind of like a once-in-a-lifetime opportunity for me.
First rally?
Yes, this is my first rally. As I've gotten older, you know, I do realize how important it is to be like a voice in the government, because this is a blessing that not all countries have, to be able to vote. And I'm so excited to see our president in person and to hear him talk and give him all my support and let him know that I am, you know, a voice for him and these, you know, tribulating times and everything like that. This is a crazy environment to be in, and I just want him to know that each and every person out here does have his support, and I want to be one of those voices.
I'm going to stand in line. I'm going to vote for our president by standing in line.
Yeah, definitely same. Standing in line. I'm going to vote for him in person for sure.
And again, that was our president of programming, Dr. Gina Loudon, covering the president's rally in Jacksonville, Florida. The president now on his way to Virginia, but a Virginia health official was trying to block the planned campaign rally that was going to take place this evening. There's about 4,000 people expected to be in attendance to that rally. You want to keep it right here on Real America's Voice News for the latest coverage of that and what we can expect to hear from the president. Coming up after the break, our favorite segment of the show, and that is when we share your voice. We asked you this particular question: what's the biggest influencing factor, if you will, when it comes to this election? In other words, what's the most important issue to you? We're going to get to some of your answers coming up after break, plus a sneak peek at the question that we are asking you today. Stick around. You're watching News On. We'll be right back. back to News On. As we always like to say here, we here at Real America's Voice News, our goal is to give you a voice. We always recommend that you join our community platform. You can find that on our website at americasvoice.news. It's basically our own social media platform. You can also find us on many other platforms. That includes Facebook, Instagram, Parlay, Cloud Hub, LinkedIn, you name it, Twitter, we are there. And today we posted a question and we asked you this: what's the number one issue influencing your vote this election year and why? And you, America, know exactly what you want, apparently. We received just a plethora of responses, so we did our very best to fit as many as possible as we could today. So getting ready for our rapid fire responses, if you will. Starting with Anthony Brennan says, it's the wars. Paul Sam says, the negative sentiment and the lack of leadership in Congress. Jeffrey Durr says, preserving our constitutional republic from socialism. Indigo Lynn says, saving our country from domestic terrorism. Richard also thinks that domestic terrorism is a big issue as well. He says, stopping domestic terrorism. Exactly. Red Main says the Constitution. Dan Chabot, I believe, says health care. There you go. Right to the point. There you have it. Guys love it. And Watchwoman says, save our Constitution and freedoms that Americans fought for. Without that, we are no longer America. And finally, Spirit Hawk from Twitter says, the truth, and the truth supports Donald J. Trump. He goes on to say Biden is a habitual liar and that the media are liars, and that's why they don't want anyone to see the true campaign or Trump live, so they can cherry pick and paste words together to twist everything out of context. Thank you all so much for sharing your thoughts and opinions. We truly value them and appreciate it here at Real America's Voice. So today, we're asking a new question, so you have some time, but don't wait too long. Here it is. How confident are you that the results of the 2020 presidential election will be, are you ready for it, fair and accurate, and why? So if you want to respond to this, it's been making the headlines. A lot of you, we've asked you that question, whether or not you trust mail-in voting or if you're going to vote in person. A lot of people speculating that it could be days, weeks, if not months before we actually know the winner of the presidential election. Of course, we don't know that for sure. This is just merely predictions, but we do want to hear your thoughts. How confident are you in this process? We'd love for you to share it. We posted the question again on Parlay, Cloud Hub, Facebook, Twitter, Instagram, and LinkedIn. So we are all over the place. Please submit your answers. And guess what? Starting Monday at noon, we will air some of your responses. And, you know, if you feel bold, which I kind of hope you do, shoot us a video. You know, one of those little self videos. We'd love that. And remember, you can always take us on the go, because we know many of you are. Just download our app. Still to come here on America's Voice, we're going to talk a little bit more about the Virginia rally that is taking place again tonight. About 4,000 people expected in attendance. We'll give you some details of that coming up right after the break. Again, you are watching News On. Again, we're going to have coverage here beginning at 8:30 tonight. The president expected to speak in Newport, Virginia. That's coming up. We'll be right back. back to News on. Uber tightening its safety protocols to include mask verification for riders. That means drivers can flag riders who aren't wearing a mask, obviously. If this happens, the rider is required to take a selfie with his or her mask on before the next trip. Uber says those who repeatedly break these rules could be blocked from actually using the app. The mandatory mask policy went into effect in May. Since then, Uber says it's removed more than 1,200 riders here in the U.S. and Canada for not following its rules. Uber says drivers can also choose to cancel a trip if the rider isn't wearing a mask. Zoom making its video meeting app a little bit more accessible for those with disabilities. Gotta love this. So new features have been put in place for the hearing impaired and visually impaired. Look at that, isn't that cool? One feature allows users to reorder Zoom video chat windows. So Zoom says this allows users to place windows, as you can see with sign language interpreters, directly by whomever is actually speaking. Users can now also adjust the size of that text used in closed captioning. And the app expanded its keyboard shortcuts and changed its interface so those who are losing their vision can log in without a mouse. Gotta love that. Love seeing innovation, and especially in times like this, because so many of us have relied on Zoom. So some of you will be really happy to hear this. Some other good news. The richest person in the world is opening up a network of tuition-free schools for children who reside in underserved areas. Jeff Bezos, that's of course who I'm talking about, just announced Des Moines, Washington as the first academy of the Bezos Academy. The preschool opens next month and will serve kids between the ages of 3 and 5. The Day One Fund is choosing the areas for the schools based on low income levels and gaps in access to licensed child care providers. Nice to see that. Bezos Academy will be 5 days a week and will run year-round. Excuse me. A little under the weather today, but we're going to get through this. And here's some news that will make your day a little tastier. Krispy Kreme just proclaimed today Sports Spirit Day. There you have it. And in its honor, the donut chain is offering a deal to all of you sports fans out there. You got to love this. Krispy Kreme says it's selling a dozen of its original glazed donuts for just, you can see it right there, no big giveaway, $5. But that's only if you're wearing some gear representing your favorite sports team. That's kind of cool looking. Jane says it can be anything from, I don't know, a jersey to a t-shirt, to those of you who like to be completely dressed up all the way from head to toe in a uniform. And it doesn't even have to be clothes. It can also be team gloves, helmets, or hats. There you go. U.S. Postal Service unveiled this year's crop of holiday stamps the other day. This is the Holiday Delight stamp. Take a look. Love that. As you can see, it comes in 4 different designs. The Postal Service says each design, quote, will add a little touch of whimsy to your holiday mailings. The stamp art was inspired by folk art and features 4 items that represent Christmas. As you can see, there's the tree, the ornament there, the stuffed stocking, and of course a prancing reindeer. I like the reindeer. That's kind of cute. Each design is in the traditional Christmas colors of red, green, and white. The Holiday Delight stamps are available nationwide. The Forever stamp costs about 55 cents per stamp and $11 for a book of 20. And finally, Target is gearing up for the holiday season as well. The retailer announced new plans for employees as it expects to see an increase in people not going actually to the store in person. It says it's going to double the number of team members devoted to those drive up and pick up orders. And that will do it for this edition of News On here on Real America's Voice. Be sure and stay tuned again tonight at 8:30 Eastern Time for the President's Rally that is going to be taking place in Virginia. And we'll see you back here Monday. Have a great weekend.